I should say thank you for the invitation, but you know it was all about the Prosecco, so I'll just but seriously, been around work with Tree of Knowledge over 13 years, I think I worked it out, and I know it's been through lots of changes and evolved into this fabulous organisation over that time, and developed and changed their programmes to meet the needs of whatever was required. So over that time though, in 3 local authorities, I'll mention Fife as well, so Dundee, Fife and Perth and Kinross as a deputy head and as a head teacher, mainly secondary background, but had the privilege to be the head of a 3 to 18 community campus in Perth and Kinross as well, so I've had my nursery and my primary fix as well, so great opportunities I've been given in my career. But I would just add into that though, I've always worked in areas and in schools and probably been attracted to schools where there's been significant deprivation, significant challenges in the local community and some tough realities for people's lives. So I want to just roll forward to the last few years, because the last couple of years, I'm always wary of how I describe this, because there's a lot of different views about the Scottish Attainment Challenge. But for the last 2 years until May, I was the Attainment Advisor for Dundee. So Dundee was one of the local authorities that came into the original Attainment Challenge because of that description of these pockets of deprivation and poverty profiles in the city. And the schools I've been working with for the last 2 years have children living in SIMD 1 and 2, over 95% of the school population. And some of these schools, just to give you that context, have received over 200,000 into primary schools of under 200 children, such as the description in terms of that poverty profile and that deprivation of the local community. So that's the kind of schools I've been working with, and I'll say a bit about where I am now. But as the Attainment Challenge Authority, we've been quite fortunate, like you said, Robert, you know, we've got all this PEF money now, Pupil Equity Fund, and we've been fortunate to have been in the Attainment Challenge from the start, because we've learned from that, we've learned about what works, and so we're really giving good guidance to our head teachers around what they could spend that money on based on the learning for the last couple of years, because we're now into year 3 of the Attainment Challenge in Scotland. And remember, PEF is just the next stage of that, the next phase of it. So you all know, we all know that the big focus around the Scottish Attainment Challenge is about raising attainment, it's about excellence, it's about equity, it's about raising attainment for all our children and young people, but it is about that persistent gap and trying to narrow and close that gap that exists in terms of outcomes in literacy, in numeracy, and in health and well-being. So I want to say a wee bit about Dundee here, because this is my context. And I would say in Dundee, for us, the biggest issue is that health and well-being. And it is because we have real pockets of huge deprivation and poverty, and you can't underestimate the stress and the chaos that brings to families. And so it's very much about their well-being that we're really focused on. And I do have a sense of, over many years, chosen a route in my own career not to be a principal teacher of the subjects I taught, which were mathematics and computing. I just looked up. I chose a guidance route because of my belief in supporting the whole child. But a few years ago in Dundee, they entered into the Dartington Unit's research centre, and they did the Evidence to Success Wellbeing Survey. And out of this, one of the biggest issues for Dundee that floated to the surface was the mental health for young people. The areas around stress, anxiety, depression, especially for our teenagers. And if you speak to our head teachers and our colleagues in our schools, they'll talk a lot about the difficulty they have engaging with some of our parents. And that's not because there's not good relationships, but we're dealing with a lot of parents who've got significant mental health issues and can't manage their own emotions. And so that makes it difficult. You know, one day they'll have a fantastic relationship with the head teacher, the next day they're threatening to go to the Courier, as it is in Dundee, the local press, their solicitor and everybody else. And so there's a lot of that kind of really tension around these relationships. So often linked with all of that comes low aspiration, no very much ambition and low expectations. And I say that not lightly, but that's not always around parents. Often that's around professionals. That they see that this child coming from that background and the expectations, there's a glass ceiling right away. So for me, this is where Tree of Knowledge come into their own in terms of the work I've done and their programmes excel. The experience I've had, as I said, working with Tree of Knowledge in Dundee, in Fife, in Perth and Kinross, has been very different. There's been lots of different programmes we've been engaged in, and I've worked with staff, I've worked with parents, and I've worked with young people in the different programmes that they offer and have been developed over the years. And I'm going to just pick up the common themes. You already know them, some of them are on the lectern in front here, but what's been that experience? What have I learned from that? What do they bring? And it is that bit about increasing that sort of personal ambition that sometimes you have to help young people to have for themselves, helping people to grow and growth mindset, raising aspirations, believing in yourself, which is so important for our young people, thinking about choices, strategies to support learning, strategies to manage these emotions, that self-regulation that we hope that children and young people will have, helping them to concentrate, helping them to think about what's important in their choices, helping people to become more self-aware, young and old, or older, and to take ownership of their learning and their own futures, which is something that's so important to build these skills and build confidence. I'm going to tell you a wee anecdote, and it might sound like a negative when I tell you, but it's a real positive story. And it's that bit about thinking about choices and being self-aware. After Gavin spoke to one of my groups of staff when I was in St John's in Perth, one of my principal teachers came after that session and said he was going to retire early because he realised where he was. And that, you know, it is a really kind of not a great story, but it is a great story because it was the best decision for that person, because he hadn't had that opportunity to really reflect on where he was and what he was doing. And although he was a fantastic teacher, a fantastic principal teacher, and has gone on to do wonderful things, it was right for him to stop being a teacher at that time because of where he was in his own life. And so all of these, there's loads of anecdotes like that, but we don't have time. We want to get to that Prosecco because I stuck with the water to begin with. So my experience over all of these in a personal way, and the feedback I've received from all the folks I've worked with who have been engaged with Tree of Knowledge, is a big part of what they do is fun, and I think that's important. Do you know, I hope that never for any day in my working life I don't take what I do very seriously, but I hope I never take myself too seriously. Do you know, and I think we're all guilty of that far too often. Do you know, we get too serious and we take ourselves too seriously. It's the work that we do, it's very important, and the responsibility is huge, and we should take that seriously. But, you know, pink hair and all that, you just can't do it. But the whole thing about just being entertained, having a laugh, but being enlightened at the same time and educated, that bit about we have to model lifelong learning if we want our young people to do the same. And that motivation that comes from all of the people that they come into contact. They do inspire, I know it's cheesy, but they do, because they are passionate about what they do. And I think that's what's important. It's genuine, authentic voices you hear, because it's people who are passionate about what they do. And helping people, I love that. I'm stealing loads of your own words. Help people to be better versions of themselves. It's not about being somebody else. It's about being the best that you can be with everything that you've got inside. So in Dundee, many of our schools are putting their pupil equity fund to good use by looking at some of the programmes. I've done some work with Dundee to look at a package of programmes and how we can work together to plan across the city. And before you get to the local press, we are not top slicing PEF funding, right? I'll just get that in there. But we are looking at sensible, manageable ways to put together packages that would be really sensible. So don't want to see that in the local press. So now I am the Chief Education Officer. I don't know how that happened. I was the Attainment Advisor. Now I'm this. It's just another title though, because one of the things that's important that I say to my head teachers when I gather them together all the time is the agenda hasn't changed. As the Attainment Advisor, you were very clear what I was talking to you about. As your Chief Education Officer, the conversation is exactly the same. This is us all still about striving for excellence for all of our young people and tackling the inequity that exists across our city and indeed across Scotland. So yeah, PEF ultimately for me, and Scottish Attainment Challenge ultimately for me, when people were asking me questions like, so why would you want to be an attainment advisor? Why do you want to get involved in this? There was a lot of controversial kind of thinking out there around the government's direction of travel. It's dead simple for me. It's about breaking the cycle of poverty for children. And what could be more important than that in any of the work that we do? And I absolutely see education as one of the ways we can break the cycle of poverty for our children. So I don't think there's anything more important that we do. I really believe that we can do it as well. Over time, it's not going to happen quickly, and all the things we're doing, eventually I think we'll see the rewards for our young people and the successes. And it will take time, but see if you didn't believe that, why would you get up in the morning and go to your work? Do you know, we're going to be there doing it because we believe we can do it. And I do think, you know, this is why we do our jobs. But in order to raise attainment, close the gap in the outcomes that exist in literacy and numeracy, which are the biggies for measurement, I think we really do need to pay attention to the child first. See a person, not a pupil. See a child, see a young person before you see a pupil. Don't see a label, looked after, child protection. Just see the person that's in front of you. And I think by focusing all of us holistically, the words that have been used already, in terms of that whole health and well-being of our children, we can help them to believe in themselves and believe in a better future. We can help them to be the best version of themselves and maximise, I hate when people say fulfill, that's another glass ceiling, maximise the potential that we know they've all got, or the gifts that they've already got inside. Our job is to elicit and pull out and get the most out of their lives now and in the future. So one of the reasons I would support and encourage my head teachers to get involved and to work with Tree of Knowledge is because these are the values that absolutely are at the core of what they do. And I think that's why we want to work with them. And they buy you coffee, they give you Prosecco, and they do make you laugh. Thank you very much.